Here in Cleveland, some secrets are buried deeper than the harshest winter. My name is Eleanor, and I am the guardian of its most terrible one. All people see is a harmless old lady with snow-white hair. They have no idea that these hands once pulled a life from the shadows of a reeking dumpster. And they definitely don't know that this very life holds a truth with the power to ruin it all. I will reveal everything. But first, I need to see how far this story will reach. Let me know where in the world you are. Comment with your city, press the like button, and subscribe. The time has come for the truth to come to light, regardless of who gets burned. It was supposed to be just another walk home from church. The street was dark, the wind whispering as if it wanted to warn me of something. But when I passed by the dumpsters at the end of the street and heard that cry, oh, my heart almost stopped. A cry of desperation, of abandonment, of a life wanting to live. And when I got closer, I found him. A baby, all dirty, wrapped in an old cloth and thrown away like trash. But what I didn't know was that this baby carried a secret with him. A secret that involved a powerful man, a missing woman, and a revenge that took its time but eventually came. And now you will understand why this baby changed everything, including me. I'll never forget that July night. The heat clung to the skin like a wet cloth, not a single breeze for relief. The streets of the neighborhood were empty, just me coming back from the evening prayer service at St. Jude's Church. My knees ached from kneeling so much on the hard pews, but us old folks don't complain about such things. I was lost in thought, thinking about my life, my late 60s, about the small pension that barely covered my medication, when I heard a strange sound. At first I thought it was a cat. There are a lot of stray animals around here. But something nudged me from within. You know when it feels like God puts a hand on your shoulder and says, "Pay attention?" It was like that. The sound was coming from behind the dumpsters on the corner, those big green ones the truck picks up every Tuesday. I approached slowly, the rosary still wrapped around my fingers, my heart beating faster and faster. When I looked inside the dumpster, I saw a small, dirty bundle, kind of hidden among plastic bags and leftover food, and it was moving. Dear Lord, it was moving. That's when I heard it again. It wasn't a cat's meow. It was the cry of a newborn baby. I put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. There, thrown among banana peels and used toilet paper, was a baby. A tiny little baby with the umbilical cord still attached, all wrinkled, red as a chili pepper, and so tiny he could fit in the palm of my hand. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, unable to believe what my eyes were seeing. How could a person do this? Throw a child in the trash as if it were an old rag? Such a great anger mixed with a pity that squeezed my chest washed over me. The baby was crying weakly, almost without strength. I took off my old cardigan, that crocheted one I made myself, and wrapped him carefully. He was cold, shivering, his skin all sticky. I picked him up and felt that he weighed less than a bag of flour. I looked around, searching for someone, some desperate woman who could have done this, but the street remained deserted. All you could hear was a dog barking in the distance and the hum of the fan from Mr. Henderson's bakery. I said to the baby, "Hush, my child, it's all right now. Eleanor will take care of you. No one will hurt you." The baby opened his little eyes. They were dark, too big for his tiny face. He looked at me as if he understood every word. I pressed him against my chest and started walking fast as my old legs would allow. I needed to get home, needed to warm up that little creature. My heart told me that every second was important. And as I walked through the dark streets of the neighborhood with that precious bundle in my arms, I already knew. I knew God had placed him in my path for a reason. That this baby, thrown away like trash, was going to change my life forever. What I didn't yet imagine was the danger that came along with him. I arrived home breathless, my legs shaky. My simple little house had never seemed so welcoming. I locked the door and turned on all the lights. I needed to see that child better, to understand if he was hurt, sick. I placed the baby on the kitchen table, on top of clean towels. He was still crying, but weaker, as if he were losing his strength. I was a teacher my whole life, but of big kids. I had never taken care of a newborn. Fear tightened my throat. What if I did something wrong? What if he died in my hands? I heated some water on the stove, got the softest dish towels I had. I started cleaning him slowly, removing that filth, that smell of garbage that no child should ever carry. That's when I noticed he was a boy, and that he had been born just hours ago. The umbilical cord was still moist, sticky. I cut it with scissors I sterilized in alcohol, just as I'd seen in a soap opera. My hands were trembling. Then I wrapped him in warm towels. The color slowly returned to his fragile little body. I cleaned his little face, his tiny fingers, every little crease of his skin, and I cried. I cried with anger at whoever did that, with fear of what could happen, with love for that life that had just entered mine. I looked at my empty cupboards and thought, what will I give him to eat? A baby needs special formula, diapers, so many things I didn't have. But at that moment, I only knew I wouldn't give up. I went to the phone and called Martha, my neighbor who had a young grandson. I spoke softly, afraid someone might hear through the thin wall. Martha, for the love of God, I need your help. I found a baby. Yes, a real baby, thrown in the trash. No, I haven't called the police yet. I need milk first, he's hungry. Martha arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a bag full of baby things. She didn't ask many questions, just looked at the child, then at me, and said she would help. We prepared a bottle with warm formula, the kind she used for her grandson. The baby sucked with such force he almost choked. He was starving, poor thing. While he was eating, I started to examine the dirty cloth he was wrapped in when I found him. It was then that I found the note. A folded piece of paper, hidden in one of the corners of the fabric. I opened it carefully and almost fell over. The handwriting was shaky. You could barely make out some words. There were dark stains that looked like dried blood. Forgive me. He will kill me if he finds out he was born. Protect my son. Just that. No name, no explanation. I showed it to Martha, who read it in silence. She looked at me with wide eyes. We need to call the police, Eleanor. This is very serious. Someone tried to kill this child. But I felt a tightness in my chest. Police meant foster care, meant handing that baby over to the system, and something inside me refused to do that. I looked at the baby, who was now sleeping peacefully after his bottle, his breathing soft, his little hands clenched into fists as if he were holding on to life itself. I can't explain what I felt. It was as if he had been mine for a long time, as if I had been waiting for him without knowing it. I put the note in my apron pocket and said to Martha, "We'll figure this out tomorrow. Tonight, he needs to rest, and so do I." Martha didn't insist. She promised to come back the next day with more milk and diapers. When she left, I was alone with the baby. We improvised a little bed for him in a drawer lined with blankets. I sat beside it and watched him sleep, so small, so defenseless. Who was his mother? Why so much desperation? And most importantly, who was he, the man who was threatening her with death? I didn't sleep that night. I kept my eyes open, watching every breath of that child. And I made a decision that would change everything. That baby wasn't going to foster care. He wasn't going to become just another number. He was going to stay with me. He was going to grow up as my son, and I was going to find out who had done that to him. I was going to find the truth, even if it was the last thing I ever did. Little did I know that this decision would put me face to face with one of the most dangerous men in the city, and that the past, that rascal we think is dead and buried, sometimes comes back to settle scores. I spent the whole night awake, watching that baby's every breath. The dawn seemed like it would never come, the clock in the living room marking each minute with a tick-tock that hammered in my head. At 4 a.m, he woke up crying from hunger. I prepared another bottle with the milk Martha had left, my trembling hands spilling drops on the kitchen counter. As he drank, his little black eyes stared at me with an intensity that scared me, as if he knew who I was, as if he was thanking me for being alive. When the sun began to rise, I picked up the note again. I wanted to better understand those words, to look for any clue that would tell me who the desperate mother who wrote it was. The paper was torn at the edges, yellowed, with stains that looked like dried blood. Some letters were blurred by tears or rain. It was impossible to tell. I reread the words written in a shaky, almost illegible hand. Forgive me. He will kill me if he finds out he was born. Protect my son. I stared at that sentence for hours, as if the letters could tell me more than what was written. Who was this? He. What kind of monster makes a woman throw her own child in the trash? The note had a strange smell, a mixture of a hospital and something stronger that reminded me of the steel mill on the outskirts of the city. That's when I noticed a detail that had gone unnoticed the night before. There was a faint mark in the corner of the paper, like a faded stamp. I brought it closer to my tired eyes and managed to make out part of a name. My heart raced. It could be a coincidence, but it looked a lot like Blackwood, the company of Silas Blackwood, one of the richest and most feared men in the region. My memory sparked. It was the same Silas who, 20 years ago, had been involved in a scandal with one of my own former students. She'd gotten a job at his mill, ended up pregnant, and then disappeared mysteriously. When Martha returned in the morning, she brought more milk, disposable diapers, and even a little outfit that belonged to her grandson. She also brought a newspaper under her arm, and her expression told me she had news. She showed me the local news page. Young woman missing. Family searches for Clara Mayhew, 23, last seen 3 days ago, leaving the Blackwood steel mill. There was a small black and white photo, a pretty girl with long hair and a shy smile. A knot formed in my stomach. It couldn't be a coincidence. Could the baby be her son? Could Silas Blackwood have something to do with this? Martha thought the same thing. You're going to the police now, right, Eleanor? This looks like a crime. She could be the boy's mother. But I hesitated. Silas Blackwood had the city police in his pocket. Everyone knew that. If I handed over the baby, he could disappear in the blink of an eye, just like his mother. I told Martha, I need time. I need to think. For now, no one can know about this boy. Martha looked at me as if I had gone crazy. You can't hide a child, Eleanor. It's kidnapping. It's a crime. I know that, I replied, but something is wrong with this whole story. If we hand him over now, we'll never know the truth. Give me a few days, please. Martha has always been my friend through thick and thin. Ever since we became widows, we've looked after each other like sisters. She sighed deeply and nodded in agreement. But I know this story is going to cause trouble, Eleanor. You're messing with powerful people. I took her hands and promised, if we don't find out anything in a week, I'll take the baby to the police station myself. In the meantime, let's name him. What about Leo? I always wanted a son with that name. Martha smiled sadly. All right. Leo suits him. A little warrior. In the following days, we set up a secret operation. Martha brought an old crib that was in her attic, some more clothes, milk, and medicine. I only went out once to buy more diapers at a pharmacy far from the neighborhood, where no one knew me. Leo grew before my eyes. He was a strong baby, despite all he had been through. He slept well, ate eagerly, and was already starting to make little noises that weren't just crying. I started to get more attached every day. I talked to him as if he understood everything, told him stories from my life, sang old lullabies my mother used to sing to me. At night, he slept in my room, and I would spend hours looking at that perfect little face, those little hands that held my finger with surprising strength. Meanwhile, Martha looked for information about Clara. She found out that she had worked as an administrative assistant at the mill for less than a year, that she came from a small town with the dream of studying, that she lived in a boarding house near the Greyhound station. Her colleagues said she had been acting strange in recent months, quieter, always with red eyes from crying. One of them commented that Clara was pregnant but was hiding it from everyone and that the baby's father was someone important. No one had the courage to say the name, but their looks said it all. Martha also discovered that the police had practically abandoned the search after 2 days. The police chief gave an interview saying that the girl had probably run away with some boyfriend. Case closed. This only increased my suspicions. Who had the power to make the police give up so quickly on a missing person case? One night, I was giving Leo a bath in the basin when I heard loud knocks on the door. My heart froze. I wrapped the baby in a towel and hid him in the bedroom closet, among blankets. The knocking continued, louder. When I opened a crack in the door, I saw two men in suits with unfriendly faces. "We're looking for a newborn baby, ma'am. We have information that you found an abandoned child." I lied with the straightest face in the world. "I don't know what you're talking about. I live alone. I haven't seen any child." One of them stuck his foot in the door so I couldn't close it. "Look, old lady, we know you found the baby. Our boss wants the child back. He's family." I hardened my expression. "I already told you I don't know anything, and if you don't leave right now, I'm going to call the police." The man laughed. "Go ahead, call the police. Let's see who they believe." It was then that Leo started to cry from the back of the room. A faint cry, but in the silence of the night, it sounded like an alarm. The men looked at each other. "See," said one, "you're lying to us." I slammed the door with all my strength, passed the key, and ran to the phone. I called Martha, desperate. They came for Leo. "Blackwood's thugs are trying to break down my door." Martha didn't think twice. "Get the baby and come to the back. I'll open the yard gate." I grabbed Leo, a bag with diapers, and went out the back door while I heard the front door being broken down. I ran through the dark yard, tripping over plants, with the baby pressed against my chest. I jumped over the low wall that divided our houses and fell on the other side, scraping my knees on the ground. Martha pulled me inside and locked everything. We hid in the storage room, listening to the men ransack my house, cursing when they realized we had escaped. That night, I understood. It wasn't just the baby who was in danger. I was also in Silas Blackwood's sights. A week later, we were still hiding at Martha's house. My house had been turned upside down, things broken, even the mattress slashed. The men came back 3 times, each time more aggressive. We needed a plan. That's when Martha had an idea. Her cousin lived in a small town 150 miles away. We could go there until things calmed down. I agreed immediately. We packed a small bag with only the essentials and waited for the 5 a.m. bus that left the Greyhound station almost empty. Martha would stay so as not to raise suspicion, telling everyone I went to visit a sick sister in another city. During the trip, Leo slept peacefully in my arms, oblivious to all the danger surrounding us. I looked out the bus window, watching the city fade behind me, and felt a mixture of fear and determination. I was running away, yes, but I was also protecting that innocent life. And there was something else. I wanted to find out what happened to Clara, if she was still alive, if she needed help. Arriving at Martha's cousin's house was a relief. It was a simple but cozy little house, surrounded by a yard full of apple trees. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "No one will find you here. And if they look, everyone will say he's your grandson." The place was so small it didn't even have its own police station, just a post that opened 3 times a week. Perfect for hiding. In the weeks that followed, Leo grew strong and healthy. He already smiled when I talked to him, already recognized my voice. I was sure he would be an intelligent, observant boy. Sometimes, looking at him, I thought he had Clara's features, the shape of her eyes, the delicate chin, but I also saw something else, something familiar I couldn't identify. One afternoon, while he was sleeping, I picked up the note again. I had taken it with me, hidden in a medicine box. I analyzed every detail, every word, trying to imagine that mother's desperation. That's when I noticed something else strange. On the back of the paper, very faint, almost invisible, there was a phone number. I wasn't sure if it was complete. The last 2 digits were too blurred. But it was a clue, the first concrete clue we had. When Leo was a little over 2 months old, I decided it was time to go back. I couldn't keep running forever, and most importantly, I couldn't let that crime go unpunished. If Silas Blackwood thought he could make a woman disappear and throw a baby in the trash without consequences, he was sorely mistaken. He didn't know the stubbornness of a retired teacher with nothing to lose. The morning we took the bus back, I made a silent promise to Leo. "I will find out what happened to your mother, and if that man hurt her, he will pay dearly. No matter how long it takes, the truth always comes out. As my grandmother used to say, lies have short legs, especially when there's a stubborn old woman chasing after them." We returned to the city on a morning of fine rain. Leo was now a little over 2 months old, chubbier, his eyes more alert. Martha was waiting for me at the Greyhound station with an old umbrella and news that made me tremble. "He's back, Eleanor. Silas Blackwood is back in town after being gone for years. He's staying at that luxury hotel near the square. They say he came to resolve business at the mill, but everyone's talking about how he's asking around about an abandoned baby." My blood ran cold. So that was it. Silas hadn't given up. On the contrary, now he himself was on the hunt. This only confirmed my suspicions. Leo was his son with Clara, and for some reason, he wanted the boy. Not to raise him. I was sure of that. A man like that has no love for anyone, only for money and power. I decided not to go back to my house. We stayed with Martha. The next day, I started to act. First thing, register Leo. I couldn't put it off any longer. If Silas tried to take him, I needed papers proving the boy was mine. I went to the county clerk's office farthest from downtown, where no one knew me. I brought a fake birth certificate I got from a contact of Martha's cousin. I had been sweating bullets the whole trip, afraid someone would be suspicious, but it worked. The clerk barely looked up from the papers, filled everything out, stamped it, and that was it. Leo was officially Leo Miller, my grandson, son of my deceased daughter. A big, fat lie, I know. I never had children. My Joseph died too soon for that. But at that moment, the lie seemed more just than any truth. Back at Martha's house, I put together a plan. I needed to know what had happened to Clara. If she was alive, she needed help. If she was dead, Silas had to pay for the crime. I called the number I found on the back of the note, using the public phone in the square. No one answered. I tried twice more in the following days, nothing. I was starting to think it was a dead end. Until, one afternoon, 3 weeks after we returned, someone knocked on Martha's door. I answered without a second thought, thinking it was the gas delivery man. I almost fell over when I saw who it was. Tall, gray hair, well-cut, expensive linen suit, Italian shoes, and that strong, sickening perfume that turned my stomach. Silas Blackwood in person, standing at my door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Eleanor, it's been a while. You haven't changed a bit." I was paralyzed. How had he found me? How did he know about Leo? My mind was spinning, looking for a way out. Leo was sleeping in the back room. Thank God. I closed the door more, leaving only a crack. "What do you want here?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my voice came out trembling. Silas widened his fake smile. "I came to pay a courtesy visit. I heard you found something that belongs to me." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." He let out a dry, humorless little laugh. "Miss Eleanor, let's not complicate things. You found a baby about 2 months ago. That baby is from my family. I've come to get him. Simple as that." I denied it with all the firmness I could muster. "You're mistaken. I haven't found any baby. The only baby here is my grandson, my daughter's son who passed away in childbirth, and he's not for sale." Silas's tone changed instantly. The smile vanished. His eyes became hard as stones. "Look here, you meddling old woman. I know you found the kid in the trash. I even have witnesses. Either you give him to me the easy way, or it'll be the hard way. And believe me, I can make your life a living hell." I felt my blood boil. Who did this man think he was? I opened the door a little more and looked him straight in the eye. It was then that I noticed those eyes were identical to Leo's. The same shape, the same dark color. I was absolutely certain. He was the father. And that's what gave me courage. "Listen here, Mr. Blackwood. I don't know what baby you're looking for, but if it's a baby that was thrown in the trash like a sack of rotten potatoes, then you should be ashamed. Ashamed to come here to my house and demand anything. Now get out of here before I call the police." Silas held the door firmly. The mask of a civilized man had completely fallen off. "You don't know who you're messing with, old woman. That brat has to disappear. He's a disgrace, proof of my—" He stopped suddenly, realizing he had said too much. He took a deep breath and tried to compose himself, changing tactics. "Look, I can pay. How much do you want? $10,000? $20,000? Name your price. I slammed the door with all my strength, almost catching his fingers. I locked it and shouted from the other side, "Get out of here! Nothing is for sale, especially not my grandson." After Silas left, my legs were so shaky I had to sit down. Martha came home from work and found me white as a sheet. I told her everything, and she was terrified. "You need to run away again, Eleanor. This man is dangerous. He's powerful. He'll end up taking the boy." But something had changed inside me. That face-to-face encounter with Silas had lit an old fire. Suddenly, I remembered where I had seen him before, more than 20 years ago when I was still teaching at the public school. Silas had come to give a lecture on entrepreneurship. At the time, he already owned the mill but wasn't as rich and powerful as he later became. I remember I didn't like him. There was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating. Months after that lecture, a former student of mine, recently graduated, went to work at his mill. She was an intelligent, dedicated girl who dreamed of going to college. Her name was Lorraine. One day, she showed up at the school crying, saying she was pregnant by her boss, that he had promised to help but then changed his mind, threatening to fire her if she didn't take care of it. I tried to advise the girl, told her to report him, to seek her rights. I never saw her again after that day. I learned sometime later that she had disappeared from the city. Some said she'd had a botched abortion and died. Others, that she had moved far away. The truth was never known. And now, 20 years later, history was repeating itself with Clara. Only this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't going to let Silas get away with it again. No, I wasn't going to let him harm Leo. I looked at the room where the baby was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to this whole storm. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work," I told Martha. "I'm going to confront him. I'm going to use the only thing he's afraid of: scandal. Silas Blackwood has a reputation to uphold, important business deals, maybe even political ambitions. He can't afford to have his name involved in a case of child abandonment, or worse." Martha looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. "And how are you going to do that?" I smiled for the first time that day. "I'm going to arrange a meeting with him. I'll bring a hidden recorder, and I'm going to make him confess." In the following days, I set my trap. I got a small recorder, the kind journalists use, on loan from the son of a former colleague. I learned how to use it properly, tested it several times to make sure it was working. I carefully chose the meeting place, the city cemetery, during the wake of a distant cousin of Martha's, a place public enough that he wouldn't try anything violent, but private enough for a conversation. I sent a message to Silas through his driver, who sometimes had coffee at the bakery near Martha's house. I said I had thought it over, that I wanted to negotiate the baby's handover, but I would only speak with him in person. At the scheduled time, I left Leo with Martha and went to the cemetery. My heart was beating so hard I thought I was going to have a stroke right there. But I stayed strong. For Leo, for Clara, for the ghost of Lorraine, my student who never got justice. Silas appeared punctually, dressed all in black as if he were really there for the wake. We moved away from the chapel, behind a large tree. He got straight to the point. "So, you've decided to be sensible. How much for the brat?" I took a deep breath and looked him straight in the eyes. "Before we talk about money, I need to know one thing. What do you plan to do with the baby afterwards?" Silas shrugged. "That's not your problem." "Yes, it is," I insisted. "I'm not handing a child over to someone who threw him in the trash." He laughed, a dry laugh that gave me chills. "I didn't throw anyone in the trash, you foolish old woman. It was his mother who did that." I feigned surprise. "The mother? But why? What would lead a mother to do that?" Silas approached menacingly. "Look, I don't have time for your stupid questions. How much do you want for the brat? $10,000? $20,000? I pretended to be considering the offer while discreetly checking if the recorder was working. Then I said, "I don't know. What if I took this whole story to the police or the newspapers? Businessman forces employee to abandon newborn son. That would make a great headline, don't you think?" That's when I saw his face completely transform. The mask of a civilized man fell, and the beast I knew existed there appeared. He grabbed my arm forcefully, hurting me. "You wouldn't do that. You're not that stupid. I have the police in my pocket. I have the newspapers too." No one would believe a crazy old woman. I pretended to be scared, which wasn't hard, and asked, "Why do you want this baby so much? Why don't you just leave him alone?" Silas squeezed my arm tighter. "Because that brat is proof of my mistake. I paid to have him gotten rid of before he was born. I paid well. But that tramp tricked me, had the kid in secret. Now he needs to disappear for good." A chill ran down my spine. So he really had tried to kill his own son. And he had possibly done something terrible to Clara too. I gathered all my courage and asked, "And his mother? What did you do to her?" Silas let go of my arm and took a step back as if he'd been slapped. "That's none of your business." But I saw something in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? I wasn't sure, but I knew I had touched a nerve. I kept pressing. "Did you kill her, or did you pay someone to do your dirty work?" Silas completely lost control. "Shut up, you meddling old woman. I didn't kill anyone. That woman tried to blackmail me, threatened to tell my wife, the newspapers. I just taught her a lesson. Whether she died or not is not my problem." I smiled inwardly. I had gotten the confession. It was recorded. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a start. A start to unmasking Silas Blackwood, and maybe finding Clara if she was still alive. I left the cemetery with shaky legs, the recorder weighing in my coat pocket as if it were made of lead. I had Silas Blackwood's confession in my hands, not complete, but enough to start unraveling that dirty mess. I went back to Martha's house, thinking about the next step. I couldn't go straight to the police. That much was clear. Silas had people bought off all over the city. I needed more evidence, more information about Clara, and most importantly, I needed to find out if she was still alive. Leo was almost 3 months old, and every day he looked more like the photo from the newspaper I kept under my mattress. The same big eyes, the same face shape. Sometimes, looking at him, I wondered what he would be like when he grew up. Would he have his mother's strength, who, even in desperation, had fought for him to live? Or would he carry something of his father, that cold, calculating nature that gave me shivers? The next morning, I started my private investigation. If the police wouldn't do their job, I would do mine. I asked Martha for help, as she knew a lot of people in the city. She spread the word among her friends that I was looking for information about the missing girl, but without mentioning Leo. She said it was because I had found a lost purse with her documents and wanted to return it. A small lie for a greater cause. On the third day, I got the first concrete lead. One of the cleaning ladies who worked at the mill called Martha. She said she didn't want to talk in person because she was afraid of losing her job, but she told her that Clara worked in the administrative sector, was quiet, polite. She started going out with Silas after a holiday party, not by her own will. He practically forced her, using his power as her boss. When she turned up pregnant, she tried to hide it from everyone, but Silas found out and was furious. He was seen yelling at her in a locked room. After that day, Clara started receiving threatening notes on her desk. A few weeks later, she didn't show up for work anymore. Officially, she had resigned, but nobody believed it. The cleaning lady also said that on the night Clara disappeared, she saw Silas's car parked near the boarding house where she lived, and that the next day when she went to clean his office, she found strange stains on the carpet that looked like blood. The carpet was replaced the same day. This information sent a chill down my spine. So Silas hadn't just threatened Clara. He had probably done something much worse. But I needed more. I couldn't accuse a powerful man like him with just rumors and a partial recording. That's when I remembered the boarding house where Clara lived. Maybe I could find more clues there. The next day, I left Leo with Martha and went to the place, an old house near the Greyhound station that rented rooms to young women who came from out of town to work in the city. The owner, Miss Gable, was a suspicious, tight-lipped old woman. When I asked about Clara, she clammed up. "I don't talk about my tenants' lives," she said dryly. I had to change my strategy. I told her part of the truth, that I was trying to help Clara, that she might be in danger. I showed her the newspaper photo. Miss Gable remained adamant. until I mentioned Silas Blackwood's name. I saw fear flash in her eyes like a shadow. "Oh, so you know," she murmured. "You know what that girl got herself into." I nodded without saying anything more. Sometimes silence makes people talk more than any question, and it worked. Miss Gable sighed deeply and began to speak. Clara was a good girl. She came from a small town, wanted to save money to go to college for accounting. She got the job at the mill and was so happy at first. She sent almost all her salary to her family. Then she started to change, got nervous, cried at night. Once she showed up with a bruised arm, said she'd bumped it on a door. A lie, of course. When her belly started to show, she tried to hide it with loose clothes, but you can't fool the eyes of someone who's seen many girls in the same situation, Miss. Gable said she tried to advise Clara to go back to her parents' house, but she was ashamed and afraid. Mostly afraid. One day, already about 6 months pregnant, Clara arrived at the boarding house desperate, locked herself in her room, and cried all night. The next morning, she was gone. She left most of her things behind, only took a small backpack. She didn't pay the last month's rent, but Miss Gable didn't care. She felt sorry for the girl. The strangest thing. 2 weeks later, a man showed up claiming to be Clara's brother, coming to get her things. Miss Gable was suspicious right away. The man looked nothing like Clara, and she had never mentioned a brother, but she was too scared to question him. She handed over the belongings, except for a notebook that had fallen behind the bed, which she only found later when she was cleaning the room for the next tenant. When she finished her story, my heart was racing. I asked about the notebook. Miss Gable hesitated but eventually gave in. She went to an old cabinet in the living room and took out a simple, blue-covered school notebook. "I kept this in case she ever came back," she explained, "but it's been so long." I took the notebook with trembling hands. It was a diary. The first pages spoke of Clara's joy with her new job, her plans for the future. Then the writing changed, became more anguished. She described how Silas began to harass her, how he pressured her until he got what he wanted, how he threatened her when she tried to pull away. And then, the discovery of the pregnancy, the desperation, the ever-worsening threats. In the last entry, dated 3 days before her disappearance, she wrote, "He said he'll kill me if I don't do what he wants. He said no one will miss me, that to the world I never existed. But I can't kill my son. I can't. I have to run. I have to protect my baby, even if it's the last thing I do." I closed the notebook, feeling a lump in my throat. There it was, the proof I needed. Clara's diary, with dates, details, names. Along with the recording, it was enough to at least open a serious investigation. Miss Gable let me take the notebook. I think she wanted justice for the girl, too. Back at Martha's, I showed her the diary and told her about the conversation with Miss Gable. As we discussed what to do next, an idea began to form in my head. What if Clara wasn't dead? What if she had managed to escape, but had to abandon the baby to throw Silas off her trail? The note said, "Protect my son," not "take care of my son because I'm no longer here." Protect, as if she still existed somewhere, hiding, afraid. I mentioned this to Martha, who found the theory plausible. If Clara was indeed alive, we needed to find her. Not only to reunite mother and child, but also because she was the key witness against Silas. But where to start? The city wasn't that big, but for someone determined to hide, I remembered the partial phone number I had found on the back of the note. It was a weak clue, but the only one we had. The next day, I went to the phone company. I played the part of a confused old lady, saying my niece had changed her number and I only remembered the first few digits. The attendant, a nice young man, said he couldn't help me due to privacy policies. But when I mentioned it was urgent, that my niece was pregnant and going through difficulties, he softened. He didn't give me the address, but he confirmed that the number belonged to a private rest home on the outskirts of the city. An expensive clinic known for handling delicate cases with absolute discretion. I left there with my heart pounding. It was a concrete lead, too strong to be a coincidence. But how could a simple girl like Clara afford such an expensive clinic? Was someone helping her? Or worse, was she there against her will? I had to find out. The next morning, I took a bus to the clinic. It was a beautiful, well-kept place, surrounded by trees. It looked more like a luxury inn than a hospital. At the reception, the young woman looked at me suspiciously when I asked for Clara. "We don't have any patients with that name," she said dryly. I tried another angle. I said I was her aunt, that I just wanted to know if she was okay. Nothing. The receptionist kept denying it. I was about to give up when an employee passed by carrying sheets. He was a young man who looked like he didn't make much money. I had an idea. I waited for him to leave and followed him to the parking lot. I offered him $50, almost half of my pension for that month, if he told me if there was a young pregnant woman or one who had recently given birth admitted there. The young man looked around nervously, but took the money. He said yes, there was a young woman who had arrived about 4 months ago, already pregnant. She was kept in the restricted wing. No one could visit her. She had the baby right there, but the child disappeared soon after. The woman was left in serious condition due to complications from childbirth, tried to kill herself a few weeks later. Now she was in the psychiatric wing, sedated most of the time. He didn't know her name. Patients in the restricted wing were identified by numbers, not names. But from the description, it could very well be Clara. I asked who was paying for her treatment. The young man shrugged. "I don't know, but they say it's a rich man. He shows up from time to time, always at night, always alone. The security guards have orders to let him in, no questions asked." I thanked him for the information and left, my head spinning. So, Clara was alive, but in Silas's power, practically a prisoner in that clinic. And worse, she had tried to kill herself, probably thinking her baby was dead. I had to get her out of there. But how? A private clinic had security guards, cameras, protocols. I couldn't just break in and take her. I had to be smarter than that. That's when I had another idea. If I couldn't get into the clinic, I had to make Clara come out, and for that, I needed her to know that her son was alive and well cared for. Back in the city, I sought out the only person who could possibly help me, Rebecca, a former student of mine who now worked at the community radio station. Rebecca had always been a determined, courageous girl, the kind who isn't afraid to stand up to the powerful. I told her everything, about finding Leo in the trash, about Silas Blackwood, about Clara in the clinic. I showed her the diary, the recording of the partial confession. Rebecca listened to it all with wide eyes. "This is pure dynamite, Miss Eleanor. If we do a story on this, Blackwood will fall. But it's also dangerous. He could come after you, me, the whole station." "I know that, dear, but I can't stand to see this man destroying lives and getting away with it anymore. He's done it before. He'll do it again if no one stops him. And there's more. There's a mother suffering, thinking she lost her child, maybe being kept drugged against her will. I can't just stand by." Rebecca thought for a moment and agreed to help. "We'll do it the right way," she said. "First, I'll try to verify if it's really Clara in that clinic. I have a cousin who works there as a nurse. Then, we'll do a special report. We won't accuse anyone directly, but we'll tell the story. A retired teacher who finds a baby in the trash, a missing young woman, a revealing diary. We'll say the baby is fine, being cared for with love. If Clara hears this, she'll know it's her son. It might be the motivation she needs to react, to fight." I thought the plan was good. The next day, Rebecca confirmed it. Her cousin had discreetly checked, and yes, the mysterious patient was indeed Clara. She was in stable condition but heavily medicated, treated as depressive with suicidal tendencies. The nurse even managed to take a discreet photo of her sleeping, which Rebecca showed me on her phone. It was her. Her face was thinner, paler than in the newspaper photo, but unmistakably the same person. My heart ached. Poor girl. 3 days later, the story aired on the radio. Rebecca did a masterful job, telling the story in an emotional way without naming names, but leaving enough clues for those who needed to understand. At the end, she gave a direct message. "If the mother of this baby is listening, know that your son is well. He is being loved, cared for, protected, and he hopes to be reunited with you." In the following days, the story resonated more than we expected. Other media outlets started to get interested. A newspaper from the capital sent a reporter. The internet was buzzing with theories about who the powerful businessman mentioned between the lines might be. Silas Blackwood must have realized the net was closing in. On Thursday night, a week after the story aired, I received a call from Rebecca's cousin. Clara had escaped from the clinic. She took advantage of the nurse's shift change when surveillance was lighter and simply walked out the back. No one knew how she had managed it. She was sedated, weak, watched. But something had given her strength. Maybe the hope of finding her son alive. The question now was, where would she go? And more importantly, did Silas already know about the escape? If he did, she would be in mortal danger. I spent a sleepless night, tossing and turning in bed, imagining Clara wandering the streets, alone, vulnerable. At 5 a.m, I heard knocks on the door. I thought it was Martha, but when I opened it, my heart almost stopped. It was her, Clara. Pale as a ghost, skinny, her hair poorly cut, clothes too big for her fragile body. But her eyes had a fire, a determination that impressed me. She looked me up and down and asked in a hoarse voice from someone who barely speaks, "Do you have my son?" I took her hands, which were ice cold, and replied, "Yes, I do, and he's been waiting for you for a long time." When I took her to the room where Leo was sleeping peacefully in his crib, Clara fell to her knees. Her crying was silent, intense, as if she had been holding back tears for months. She slowly approached the crib, afraid of waking the baby, and touched his little face with her fingertips, as if she couldn't believe he was real. "He's so big," she whispered. "So beautiful, so alive." She looked at me with teary eyes. "How did you find him?" I told her everything. The night I found him in the trash, the note, my investigations, the confrontation with Silas. She listened in silence, nodding slowly. When I finished, she said, "I need to tell you my side of the story, and you need to know that Silas will come after us. He will never give up. There's much more at stake than you can imagine." That dawn was the longest and shortest of my life. Long because we spent hours listening to Clara recount the hell she had lived through. Short because time flew as we tried to come up with a plan to protect ourselves from Silas Blackwood. Her story was blood-curdling. She said she met Silas at a mill party. He started pursuing her, using his power as a boss to force dates. When she tried to resist, he threatened to fire her. With no money to go back to her parents' house in her small town, and no other contacts in the city, she gave in. When she discovered the pregnancy, she tried to hide it, but he noticed the changes in her body and became furious. First, he tried to force her to have an abortion. When she refused, the threats worsened. Clara started to gather evidence, recorded conversations, kept threatening notes, wrote everything in her diary. One night, returning to the boarding house, she was attacked by 2 men. She thought they were going to kill her, but instead, they took her to the clinic. There she discovered Silas's plan was to keep her imprisoned until the baby was born. Then he would disappear with the baby, throwing him in the trash, as it ended up happening. And she would remain institutionalized, diagnosed with mental problems she never had. But Clara managed to fool the nurses. She pretended to take the drugs that kept her sedated, hiding them under her tongue. One night, shortly before giving birth, she managed to convince a cleaning lady to take a note, a desperate note she wrote with her own blood, not knowing to whom, just hoping someone would help her son. She had no idea if the note had reached anyone. After the birth, they told her the baby had been stillborn. She didn't believe it, but she was too weak to react. She tried to kill herself weeks later when her strength returned a little. She was transferred to the psychiatric wing, even more isolated, until she heard the story on the radio. A nurse had left the device on near her room. When she heard about a retired teacher who had found a baby in the trash, she knew instantly it was her son. Hope returned. She gathered the little strength she had and planned her escape. Now she was here, with her son in her arms, but she knew Silas would come after them. He wouldn't give up easily. At first, I thought it was only because Leo and I were living proof of his affair. But the real reason he was so desperate, the reason he kept me alive instead of just killing me, was something far more dangerous. He wasn't just hiding a personal scandal, he was protecting a criminal empire. I looked at her, stunned by her words. A criminal empire? I asked, my voice a whisper. Clara nodded, her expression grim. She leaned closer, as if afraid the walls could hear. There is one thing, she said softly. The real reason he's so desperate to silence me. It's not just because of the baby, or the evidence of harassment. It's because of what I discovered at the mill. Clara had worked in the administrative sector. She had access to many documents. By accident, she found evidence that Silas was embezzling public money, laundering drug money through the mill, and even dumping toxic waste into the river that supplied the city. Environmental crimes, tax crimes, all documented in files that she, as a precaution, had copied and hidden. On the second to last day before being kidnapped, she had given a copy of everything to a friend, asking her to keep it without asking questions. Silas found out she knew, but he wasn't sure if she had proof or if she had already shown it to anyone. That's why he didn't risk just killing her. He needed to be sure first that the evidence wouldn't surface later. This explained a lot. It explained why he kept her alive in the clinic, why he invested so much money to hide her instead of simply getting rid of the body. He needed to know what she had done with the evidence. I asked who this friend was and if we could trust her. Clara said yes. It was Maria, who worked in the mill cafeteria. A simple, loyal woman who had no idea what she was guarding. She only knows it's important to me, Clara explained. We agreed that the next day I would go look for Maria. But we had a more urgent problem. Silas surely knew about Clara's escape by now and wouldn't take long to connect the dots and come after her at my house. We needed a safe place to hide, at least for a few days, until we decided how to use that evidence. I thought of several places: Martha's cousin's house in the country, Rebecca's house from the radio. But they all had problems. Silas had resources. He could send people to search anywhere. That's when Martha arrived with news that changed everything. Her cousin George had died suddenly, a heart attack. The wake would be the next day at the city cemetery, the same one where I had recorded Silas's confession. Suddenly, I had an idea that seemed crazy but might just work. The wakes at the cemetery lasted all day, with the burial usually at the end of the afternoon. The chapel had a small room in the back where the groundskeeper stored tools and sometimes even slept. We could hide there for a day, maybe two. It would be the last place Silas would think to look. Martha thought the idea was absurd, but Clara agreed immediately. "I'm not afraid of places for the dead," she said. "I'm afraid of the living." We arranged everything. Martha would talk to the groundskeeper, an old friend of her late husband. She would say that Clara was a niece who had problems with a violent husband and needed to hide with her son for a day or two. She would ask him to leave the back door unlocked and not mention it to anyone. It was risky, but it was our best option. Meanwhile, I would go look for Maria early in the morning, before going to the wake. It crossed my mind to notify the police, but Clara was firm. "We can't trust the local police. Silas has people bought off in there. If they know we have evidence against him, they might kill us before we even file a report." I agreed. We had to be smarter, use the resources we had. In the middle of the night, when Clara finally slept, I watched her and Leo side by side on the makeshift bed. Mother and son, finally together. My chest ached thinking of everything that girl had been through, the courage she had shown. And it filled me with a furious hatred for Silas Blackwood, a man who destroyed lives as if stepping on ants. At that moment, I swore to myself, he would not harm anyone else, not even if I had to join George in the cemetery to ensure it. The next morning, I left early, before the sun was even fully up. I left Clara and Leo with Martha, who would provide dark clothes for her after all. They were going to a wake. I had written down Maria's address on a small piece of paper. She lived in a housing project on the outskirts, far from the center. I took 2 buses and arrived there around 7 a.m. When I knocked on the door, a woman in her 40s, hair tied in a ponytail, answered with a look of someone who had just woken up. "I'm sorry for the early hour," I said. "I'm a friend of Clara's." Maria's eyes widened when she heard the name. At first, I thought she was going to send me away, but instead, she opened the door wider and pulled me inside. She closed the door quickly and asked in a low voice, "Is she alive?" I nodded. "And she needs your help, that thing she asked you to keep." Maria didn't ask any more questions. She went to her room and came back with a stack of papers. She handed it to me as if it were gold. "Tell her I prayed for her every day," she said with tears in her eyes. I thanked her and left quickly. On the way to the cemetery, I stopped by Rebecca's house at the radio station. I handed her the papers and explained the situation. Rebecca understood the gravity of it immediately. "I'll make copies," she said, "and I'll prepare a story with all of this. If anything happens to you, it goes on the air the same day. Silas will have no way to escape. It was our guarantee, our life insurance." I arrived at the cemetery around 11 a.m. George's wake had already begun. There were about 30 people in the chapel, including Martha. Clara was nowhere in sight, probably already hidden in the back room with Leo. I participated in the prayers, offered my condolences, mingled with the grieving crowd. No one would suspect that right there, just a few feet away, a fugitive young mother was hiding with her baby, and evidence that could bring down the most powerful man in the city. Around 2 p.m., when many had already left, and only the closest relatives remained, I saw a strange movement at the cemetery entrance. An expensive black car parked. Silas Blackwood got out, accompanied by 2 men with unfriendly faces, the same ones who had invaded my house days before. My blood ran cold. How had he found us? Had someone talked? I watched from a distance, pretending to be absorbed in prayer. Silas didn't enter the chapel. He circulated around the cemetery, looking between the tombstones as if searching for something or someone. His thugs split up, each going in a different direction. I understood the plan. They were searching the entire cemetery. It was a matter of time before they reached the back room. I had to act fast. I managed to slip out of the chapel unnoticed and ran, hiding among the tombstones until I reached the back. I knocked lightly on the door, 3 short taps, our agreed-upon signal. Clara opened a crack, her eyes wide with fear. "Silas is here," I whispered. "With 2 men. They're searching the whole cemetery. We need to leave now." She turned pale but reacted quickly. She picked up Leo, who luckily was sleeping, and wrapped him in a blanket. We went out the back, where there was a small gate that led to a side street. We were almost at the gate when I heard a voice behind us. Well, well, what a touching scene. It was Silas, alone, without his thugs, but with a gun pointed directly at us. I stopped instantly, instinctively placing my body between him and Clara with the baby. He smiled that cold smile that gave me the shivers. "Playtime's over," he said. "The game of hide and seek is finished. You're coming with me now, all 3 of you." I felt Clara tremble behind me, but her voice came out firm. "We're not going anywhere with you, Silas. It's over. We know everything. About the embezzlement, about the environmental crime. It's all documented. If anything happens to us, the evidence goes straight to the FBI and the newspapers." Silas laughed, but I noticed a hesitation in his eyes. "What evidence? What are you talking about, you lunatic?" Clara took a step forward, still holding Leo. "The documents, Silas. The ones that disappeared from your drawer. I have copies of all the files in the Operation Cleanup folder. The fake contracts, the doctored reports, the deposits in offshore accounts. It's all saved in places you'll never find." Silas's face changed. The smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure hatred. His hands trembled slightly, making the gun waver. "You're bluffing," he said through gritted teeth. "I gave everything to a journalist," I replied, stepping forward. "She has orders to release it if we don't check in by the end of the day. We're not afraid of you, Silas." Not anymore. He seemed to calculate the possibilities, his eyes darting from me to Clara to the baby. I saw the exact moment he made his decision, the murderous glint in his eyes, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could shoot, we heard a loud noise behind him. Someone had just arrived. Rebecca, with a recorder in her hand, and the cemetery groundskeeper by her side. She was recording everything. Silas hesitated, confused by the sudden arrival. It was enough for the groundskeeper, a strong man despite his age, to grab his arm, forcing him to drop the gun. There was a brief struggle. Silas thrashed like a cornered animal, screaming threats, swearing he would kill everyone. But he had no power there anymore. He was just a cowardly man, finally facing the consequences of his own actions. When the police arrived, called by Rebecca even before she came to the cemetery, Silas was already immobilized. They took him away in handcuffs, yelling that he would sue everyone, that he had powerful friends, that no one could prove anything. But the truth is, we had proof. The mill documents, Clara's diary, the recording of the confession in the cemetery, and now the attempted murder witnessed by Rebecca and the groundskeeper. Even with all the money in the world, it would be hard to escape this time. When everything calmed down, I looked at Clara, still holding Leo, who had miraculously slept through the whole commotion. "It's over?" she asked, her voice trembling as if she couldn't believe it. "Not yet," I replied. "We still have a long way to go. Depositions, trials, judgments. But the worst is over. You're safe." She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. A tired but genuine smile. Leo woke up at that moment, opened his little eyes, and looked around curiously, so oblivious to everything that had happened, to all the danger he had been in. What world will he find when he grows up? I thought. A more just world, I hope. A world where men like Silas Blackwood can't do whatever they please without consequences. And if it depended on me, on Clara, on Rebecca, and on all the people who refused to bow their heads to evil, that world was already beginning to be born. Right there, in a cemetery, on the day of the burial not only of George, but also of Silas Blackwood's empire of lies. The days after Silas Blackwood's arrest passed like a hurricane. It seemed like the whole city had suddenly woken up, discovering the horrors that had been happening under their noses for so long. The newspapers talked about nothing else. His thugs were also arrested, singing like canaries to reduce their sentences. One of them confessed he had been paid to get rid of Clara's baby, said he was ordered to throw the child in the trash so that if found, it would look like maternal abandonment, not a planned crime. Another confessed to helping keep Clara institutionalized, bribing doctors and nurses. The evidence from the documents was even more devastating, showing a giant scheme of corruption, money laundering, and environmental crimes that extended far beyond Silas. Local politicians, businessmen, even a judge were involved. The operation was named Mill of Crimes, and the feds arrived every day with new arrests. The city was buzzing with the revelations. People who once flattered Silas now pretended they had never been his friends. Others who knew about irregularities but were afraid to report them began to speak up. It was as if a dam had burst, and now everything was coming to the surface at once. In the midst of that turmoil, Clara was slowly recovering. Color returned to her cheeks, strength to her arms, light to her eyes. She spent hours with Leo in her lap, talking to him as if he understood every gurgle, every smile. The boy also blossomed, becoming smarter and stronger every day. He already recognized his mother, calming down instantly when she picked him up. I watched the two of them with a heart tight with emotion. After so much pain, so much struggle, they were finally at peace. But there was still a pending issue. What would happen when all of this was over? When Silas was tried and convicted? When the dust settled? Would Clara go back to her parents' house? Would she take Leo away? The idea of being separated from that boy I had saved, whom I had cared for as if he were my own, caused me a physical pain, a tightness in my chest I had never felt before. One afternoon, while Leo was sleeping, Clara came to sit with me on the porch. She had a glass of lemonade in her hand and a serious expression on her face. "Miss Eleanor, we need to talk about the future," she said. I felt my heart race. This was it. She was going to say she was leaving, taking Leo. I tried to prepare myself mentally, to remember that this was always the right, the just outcome. After all, she was the mother. I was just the old woman who had found the baby. I took a deep breath and asked, "Are you going back to your parents' house?" She looked at the horizon, her eyes lost in thought. "I don't know if I can." I didn't tell them about the pregnancy, about anything that happened. I'd have to explain everything now, and I don't know if I'm ready. Besides, the investigation will last for months. The lawyers from the district attorney's office said I need to stay close to testify. She paused, took a sip of lemonade. "And there's one more thing. I don't want to be that girl who left her small town dreaming of a better life and ended up in the clutches of a predator anymore. I want to start over, study, work, raise my son, be someone Leo can be proud of when he grows up." I remained silent, digesting her words. My mind was already working, thinking of possibilities. She could stay at my house for as long as she needed. I could help take care of Leo while she studied. Maybe she could get a scholarship at the community college. I knew people there, former colleagues who could help. I was about to suggest all this when Clara said something that caught me completely by surprise. "But I don't want to do this alone, and I don't want to take Leo from you. He's your son too now. You saved his life when I couldn't." I looked at her, unable to believe what I had just heard. She continued, "I was thinking, if you agree, we could continue here. The two of us, taking care of him. I can get a job, help with expenses, study at night. You could stay with him when I'm not here. We would be a family. A different kind of family, but a family." Tears came to my eyes before I could stop them. I, who had never had children, who thought I would spend my old age alone, suddenly gained not only a grandson but also a daughter. I took her hands and said with a choked voice, "There is nothing in the world that would make me happier, my daughter." In the months that followed, our life took on a new rhythm. The house that once seemed too big for one old woman was now full of life. We fixed up the back room for Clara, left my room for Leo, and I started sleeping in the living room on a sofa bed. I didn't mind. In fact, I even liked falling asleep to the sound of the baby's noises on the monitor, knowing he was safe, protected. Clara got a part-time job at a pharmacy near the house. The owner, Mrs. Zita, was a longtime friend of mine and was moved by the story. She paid a fair wage and gave Clara flexibility to care for her son and attend court hearings when necessary. When she was working, I took care of Leo with all the love in the world. I read him stories, showed him pictures in books, sang the same lullabies my mother sang to me. He grew strong, smart, with a smile that lit up the whole house. At night, when Clara came back, we would have dinner together, and she would tell me about her day, about her plans for the future. She had enrolled in a free college prep course offered by local university students. She dreamed of going to law school. "I want to help other women who have been through what I've been through," she would explain with a determined glint in her eyes. The case against Silas proceeded. He tried everything, bribing witnesses, threatening prosecutors, even forging a medical report saying he had psychiatric problems. Nothing worked. The evidence was too solid. Clara testified 3 times, always firm, always dignified, even having to relive the horrors she had endured. I accompanied her to every hearing, holding her hand in difficult times, taking care of Leo while she was on the stand. At one of these hearings, something unexpected happened. The prosecutor called a surprise witness, a woman in her 40s who entered the room with her head down, visibly nervous. When she raised her face to take the oath, I felt a jolt of recognition. It was Lorraine, my former student who had disappeared 20 years ago after getting pregnant by Silas. She was alive. Older, her face marked by years of suffering, but alive. Her testimony was heartbreaking. She told how Silas had gotten her pregnant, how he threatened her, how he forced her to have an abortion that almost killed her, how he then sent her out of town with money and death threats if she ever returned or told anyone. She had spent years hiding in another state, traumatized, living off odd jobs, in constant fear that Silas would find her. She only came forward when she heard on television that he had been arrested. When she finished her testimony, our eyes met. There was recognition in those eyes, and something more. Maybe gratitude for my having done what I couldn't do for her so many years ago. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, families of other victims of Silas who had come forward throughout the process. He entered in handcuffs, dejected, with none of the arrogance he used to have. When the judge announced the sentence, 30 years in prison for attempted homicide, kidnapping, corruption, environmental crimes, and so many other charges that they barely fit on the paper, a collective sigh swept through the room. It was the end of an era of impunity. The city could finally breathe a sigh of relief. On the way out of the courthouse, Lorraine came to talk to me and Clara. She was leaving, going back to the small town where she lived now, but first, she wanted to thank us for doing what she didn't have the courage to do: confront Silas and get justice. "You didn't just save the baby and yourselves," she said with tears in her eyes. "You saved all of us. All who came before and who might have come after." We went home that day with a strange feeling of closure, as if a long and painful cycle had finally come to an end. Leo, now almost a year old, greeted us with shrieks of joy, oblivious to the day's importance. When Clara picked him up, he grabbed her face with his chubby little hands and gave her a slobbery kiss. As I held him in my arms, I saw Clara's strength in his bright eyes, but I couldn't help but see the undeniable shadow of Silas in the defiant set of his tiny jaw. The legal battle was over, and we were safe, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that the ghost of his biological father would be a part of our story forever. We had won, but the future was still an unwritten page. And so, life moved on. The shadow of Silas faded into the background as our days filled with the simple joys of raising a child. Clara enrolled in community college, her old dream reignited. I settled into my new role as a full-time grandmother, a role I cherished more than anything. We built our small, unconventional family on a foundation of love and resilience. For 2 years, we lived in a bubble of peace, almost forgetting the storm we had weathered. But some stories, we learned, don't have such simple endings. It was night when we finally managed to get him to sleep. We went to the porch, as we had so many other times, to talk a little before bed. The sky was clear, full of stars. A gentle breeze swayed the leaves of the apple tree in the yard. I remember looking at Clara and thinking how much she had changed since that dawn when she appeared at my door, pale as a ghost. Now she had color in her cheeks, meat on her bones, life in her eyes. She noticed my gaze and smiled. "I was just thinking," she said after a moment. "I never properly thanked you for everything you did. For saving my son, for saving me too. For risking your own life, for people you didn't even know." I tried to dismiss the thanks, to say that anyone would have done the same, but she wouldn't let me. "That's not true," she insisted. "Most people would have called the police or Child Protective Services when they found a baby in the trash. Most wouldn't have investigated, wouldn't have confronted a powerful man like Silas. You are special. I will never be able to repay what you did for us." It was my turn to smile. "You already have, my daughter. You gave me a family. At my age, when I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone, I gained a beautiful grandson and a courageous daughter. There is no greater gift in the world." Clara took my hand, squeezed it tightly. She said nothing. She didn't have to. We sat there, looking at the stars, thinking about the future we had ahead of us. A future that, just a few weeks before, had seemed impossible. Leo would grow up strong, safe, loved. Clara would study, achieve her dreams. I would grow old watching my improvised family flourish. And together, the 3 generations, united not by blood but by something much stronger, love and courage, we would write a different story. A story where evil doesn't win, where babies aren't thrown in the trash, where women aren't silenced. A story of redemption, of second chances, of hope. Our story. 2 years have passed since Silas Blackwood's conviction. Life has moved on, like a river that finally finds its right path after being diverted by rocks and debris. Leo is now almost 3 years old, a smart, talkative boy full of energy who fills the house with his endless questions and contagious laughter. Everyone says he has his mother's eyes and his grandmother's stubbornness. I, of course, always reply that I don't know where this so-called stubbornness comes from. Clara got into law school with a full scholarship. She studies at night after her job at the pharmacy, where she has now been promoted to assistant manager. During the day, while she works, I take care of Leo. I take him to preschool 3 times a week, pick him up, give him lunch, teach him his first letters. On weekends, the 3 of us are inseparable, the 3 generations united by the breakfast table, the park bench, the strolls in the city park. Our routine was only interrupted on a rainy Wednesday when we received the news. Silas Blackwood's final appeal at the Superior Court had ended. All his appeals had been denied. The sentence was upheld. 30 years in prison with no right to parole for the first 15. It was the definitive end to that story. Or so we thought. The next day, the phone rang early. It was the prosecutor's secretary. Silas Blackwood wanted to speak with Clara before being transferred to the maximum security prison in another state. He had something important to say, something related to Leo. My blood ran cold when I heard that. What did that monster still want with our boy? Clara hesitated, thought long and hard. Finally, she decided to go. Not for him, she explained, but for Leo. If there's something he needs to know about his biological father, it's better he knows everything from the beginning. Better not to leave loose ends, buried secrets that could resurface in the future and hurt our boy. On the scheduled day, we went to the prison together. Leo stayed with Martha, who was now like a great aunt to him. The place was cold, impersonal, with that smell of disinfectant that can't hide the odor of human desperation. They led us to a small room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs on each side. We waited for almost an hour, our hands intertwined, giving each other strength. When the door finally opened, I almost didn't recognize the man who entered. Silas Blackwood was unrecognizable. Thin, aged, with none of the arrogance he used to carry like a second skin. His eyes, however, were the same, dark, piercing, identical to Leo's Ialsiam's Ludovium. He sat down slowly, the handcuffs clinking against the table. He was silent for a while, looking at us. Then, without beating around the bush, he spoke. I came to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, that I never will, but I had to say it. His voice was hoarse, broken, as if the words cost him a physical effort to get out. Clara didn't answer, just observed the man who had destroyed her life with a neutral, controlled expression. He continued, I didn't come just for that. I came because you have the right to know everything. About me, about the boy. He took a deep breath, his handcuffed hands trembling slightly. I was a monster to you, Clara. To you and to other women before you. I've lived with that on my conscience every day, every night, for the last 2 years in prison. There's no escaping your own thoughts, your own crimes. They just sit there, staring at you when you close your eyes. He paused, as if gathering strength to continue. About the boy. About Leo. I did what I did because I was afraid. Not just of the scandal, the shame. I was afraid because in my family, there's a genetic disease. A serious disease that manifests in childhood. My father died from it. My brother too. I escaped, but I'm a carrier. I always knew I had a 50% chance of passing it on to a child. When you got pregnant, I panicked. I didn't want to bring a child into the world condemned to suffer, to die young. It was an excuse I gave myself for the atrocities I committed, as if I were being merciful. Clara turned pale, squeezing my hand so hard it almost hurt. What disease? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Silas lowered his eyes. A rare form of muscular dystrophy. It starts with muscle weakness, progresses to respiratory and cardiac problems. Most don't live to see 20. A chill ran down my spine. Our Leo, so full of life, so healthy, could be carrying this sentence. My God, it wouldn't be fair. Not after everything he had already survived. Clara must have thought the same thing, because her eyes filled with tears. But he's fine, she said, almost to herself. He's healthy, strong. The doctors never found anything wrong. Silas nodded. It could be that he didn't inherit it. Like I said, it's a 50% chance. But you need to know. You need to be aware of the signs. Do the right tests. The sooner you find out, if that's the case, the better the chances for treatments that can slow the progression. He paused again, then continued. There's one more thing. In my sentence, besides prison, I was ordered to pay you compensation. It's a considerable amount. I never agreed to pay. I filed every possible appeal. But now I want you to accept it. Not as forgiveness. I know no amount of money can pay for what I did, but as a way to ensure that Leo has the best possible treatment if he needs it. And that you, Clara, can finish your studies, build a dignified life for yourselves. The silence that followed was heavy, dense, almost palpable. I looked at Clara, trying to decipher what was going through her head. Her face was a mask of conflicting emotions: anger, fear, confusion. Finally, she spoke with a controlled voice that hid the storm inside. I'm going to take Leo to a specialist. I'm going to do all the necessary tests. If he has this disease, we will face it together, just as we've faced everything else. As for the money, I don't want anything from you. But if you insist, I will accept it. Not for me, but to create a fund for Leo's treatment, if necessary, and for his education. And if there's any left over, to help other women who have been through what I went through. Silas nodded, a strange glint in his eyes. Maybe tears, maybe just the reflection of the cold light in the room. Before we could say anything more, the guards came to get him. Time was up. He stood up, looked at us one last time and said, I know I have no right to ask for anything more, but one day, when he's older, when he can understand, tell him that in the end, I tried to do the right thing, at least once in my life. We left the prison in silence, each lost in her own thoughts. The sky was overcast, heavy with rain, as if reflecting the storm in our hearts. On the way home, we stopped at a small church, the kind that stays open all day. I don't know if Clara was religious before all this, but at that moment, I know we both needed some comfort greater than our own strength. We went in, sat on the worn wooden pews, and remained in silence, looking at the simple altar. I don't know how long we stayed there. I only know that when we left, something had settled within us. A silent acceptance, a renewed determination. Clara held my hand and said, No matter what happens, Grandma, no matter if Leo has this disease or not, we will take care of him. We will give him the best life possible. We will fill every day with so much love that, whether his life is long or short, it will have been worth it. I nodded, unable to speak with the lump that had formed in my throat. We returned home, where Leo was waiting for us, oblivious to everything, just happy to see his mother and his grandmother back. The following weeks were a period of anxious waiting. We managed to get an appointment with a renowned geneticist in the capital. We did exams, tests, evaluations. Leo, with his curious nature, turned every hospital visit into an adventure. He made friends with nurses, doctors, other patients. He wasn't afraid of needles, of noisy machines, of cold rooms. For him, it was all part of a big game. Clara and I took turns not showing the fear that was eating away at our insides. When the results finally came, we went to the office together. The doctor, an elderly gentleman with white hair and kind eyes, greeted us with a smile we couldn't decipher. He picked up a thick folder full of papers, put on his glasses, and began to explain complicated medical terms that we barely understood. Until Clara, unable to take it anymore, interrupted. Doctor, please, does he have the disease or not? The doctor took off his glasses, looked directly at us, and said the words that changed our lives again. Number Leo does not have the disease, and he is not a carrier of the gene. In fact, all the tests indicate that he is a perfectly healthy child. What's more, the DNA shows that Silas Blackwood is not his biological father. We felt as if the floor had disappeared from under our feet. What do you mean? Clara said in shock. If Silas isn't the father, who is? The doctor explained that he couldn't know with just those tests. He would have to do comparative tests with the DNA of the real father, if we knew who he was. We left the office stunned, trying to process the information. Clara seemed to be in a trance, her gaze distant, lost in memories. It was only when we got home, when Leo ran to hug her with his usual energy, that she seemed to snap out of it. She sat on the sofa with the boy in her lap and finally spoke. I remember. It has to be him. A month before she started seeing Silas, there was another guy. A colleague from the mill. from the maintenance department. We went out a few times, but soon after, he was transferred to another city. We never spoke again. I didn't even tell him about the pregnancy because I was sure it was Silas's, based on the dates. But now it all makes sense. His name was Daniel. A simple, kind young man who treated me with respect, the opposite of Silas. I couldn't believe it. After so much suffering, so many struggles, came this revelation. Leo didn't carry the blood of that terrible man. He didn't have the genetic sentence we feared. He was the son of a good man who didn't even know he existed. I asked Clara if she wanted to look for this Daniel, to tell him the truth, to give Leo the chance to meet his real father. She was silent for a long time, stroking the hair of the boy who was now playing on the rug, oblivious to the adults' conversation. Finally, she said, "Yes, he deserves to know, and Leo deserves the chance to know his father. But I have no illusions. It's been years. He could be married, with another family. He might not want this responsibility, and that's okay. The three of us are already a complete family. Anything beyond that will be a bonus, not a necessity." Finding Daniel wasn't easy. The mill had closed after Silas's scandal, and many employees had scattered across the country in search of new jobs. But Rebecca, our friend from the radio, helped us through contacts, social media, old colleagues. We finally got a phone number. Clara hesitated a lot before calling. She rehearsed what she would say dozens of times. When she finally worked up the courage, the conversation was brief, full of awkward pauses, confused explanations. Daniel, now living hundreds of miles away, listened to everything in silence. At the end, he asked for time to process the information. He said he would call back in a few days. Those were the longest days of our lives. Leo, now almost 4, was starting to ask questions about family, about fathers. The other kids at preschool talked about their dads, brought pictures, told stories. He started to notice that his family was different. Not in a bad way. He loved having a young mother and a grandmother who spoiled him, but different. When Daniel finally called back, he surprised us all. Not only did he believe the story, but he asked to do a DNA test as soon as possible. And what's more, he wanted to meet Leo. He was single, had never married. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at a large company, had a stable life, his own house, and most importantly, seemed genuinely emotional about the possibility of being a father. We arranged to meet at a city park on a sunny Sunday. Clara was as nervous as a teenager on a first date. She tried on 3 different outfits before deciding, fixed her hair 1,000 ways. I was anxious too, but for different reasons. What if this man wanted to take Leo from us? What if he wanted father's rights, visitation, shared custody? Our perfect life could change completely. But when we finally saw him walking shyly towards us, with a gift package under his arm and a nervous smile on his face, all our worries dissipated. Daniel was exactly as Clara had described him. A simple man with a kind expression, honest eyes, and most impressively, he had the same eyes as Leo. The same shape, the same brown color with golden flecks. The same easy smile, the same dimple in his chin. We didn't need a test to know the truth. It was written in every feature of their faces. The meeting went better than any of us could have hoped. Leo, with his open and curious nature, loved Daniel at first sight, especially after he opened the present and found a remote-controlled car, every boy's dream at that age. Daniel was respectful, didn't make grand promises or try to force an intimacy that didn't exist yet. He just said he was happy to meet his son, that he wanted to be part of his life to the extent that it was possible and comfortable for all of us. That night, after Leo fell asleep, exhausted from so much playing, the 3 of USMA, Clara, and Daniel talked for hours about the past, the present, the future, about how we would make this unusual situation work. Daniel didn't want to disrupt the life we had built. He understood that his role would be that of a present father, but one who respected the fact that Leo already had an established family, routines, deep bonds. When he finally left, very late at night, I had a strange feeling in my chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something else. Something like hope. In the months that followed, Daniel became a constant presence in our lives. He came on weekends, took Leo for outings, played ball in the yard, taught him how to fix broken things. Gradually, he grew closer not only to his son but also to Clara. I saw the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was paying attention, the way their hands accidentally touched when they passed objects to one another, the shy smiles, the conversations that lasted late into the night after Leo was asleep. I wasn't surprised when, about a year later, they announced they were dating. Nor when, 6 months after that, Daniel proposed to Clara, a simple wedding in our backyard, with Leo as the ring bearer, tripping over the improvised runner and making everyone laugh. Today, it's been exactly 5 years since I found Leo in that dumpster. 5 years since an abandoned baby completely changed my life as a lonely retired teacher who thought she had lived all there was to live. Now, our house is bigger. Daniel sold his and used the money to buy the lot next door, expanding ours. We have more rooms, a larger yard where Leo can run freely, a spacious porch where we gather every night to talk, tell stories, plan the future. Clara is in her final year of law school, already interning at a firm that specializes in defending female victims of violence. Daniel continues in the same job, now as a manager respected by all. And Leo is 5 years old, about to start kindergarten. He's a smart, curious boy, full of questions about everything. Sometimes, questions about the bad man who hurt his mother. We tell him the truth, as much as he can understand, that there was a bad man who did wrong things, but that he's paying for his crimes. And that for a long time we thought this man was his father. But we discovered that his real father was Daniel, a good man who didn't know he existed. That sometimes families are formed in strange, unexpected ways, but what's important is the love that exists between people. He seems to understand, the way children understand things, with a simplicity and wisdom that we adults often lose. Silas Blackwood continues to serve his sentence. We learned by chance that he really does have the genetic disease he mentioned. He didn't lie about that. The symptoms began to appear in his 2nd year in prison. He probably doesn't have much time left. Part of me feels sorry for him, dying alone, abandoned, paying for his crimes. Another part, the one that still remembers the fragile baby thrown in the trash, the young mother held prisoner, thinks it's just justice, but I don't think about it much. I prefer to focus on the present, on the family we built from the ashes of the destruction he caused, and especially on the future, a future that promises to be even happier. Clara is 2 months pregnant. Leo will have a little brother or sister soon. When she told us the news at Christmas dinner, we all cried with joy. Later that night, alone on the porch, looking at the stars, I thought about how life comes full circle, how from the greatest despair, the greatest hope can be born. How an old retired teacher who found a baby in the trash on a hot July night ended up gaining a whole family, a new reason to live, a story to tell. And what a story! That is our story. A story that began at the bottom of a dumpster, but ended among the stars. It proves that evil can be powerful, but it's no match for the determination of a stubborn old woman and the love that can create miracles. If this story has lit even a single spark of hope in you, hit like to spread that light. Comment and share a moment when you felt a miracle in your life, or simply let me know how this story touched you. And subscribe to the channel because our journey isn't over and there are many more stories of hope left to tell. Remember, even in the deepest darkness, with just a little love, hope will sprout. God bless you all.